yes, we do have somewhat of a war machine. A good example is Oshkosh. They do have a plant in Bradenton. They make some of those armored vehicles that go over to Iraq. Headquartered out of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I've written about the company a number of times. But that's a small part. Most of the money that's being spent is going outside the United States. To make matters worse, as you mentioned about the veterans, when these people come back into the country, they need jobs. There are no jobs. They end up in prison. They end up on the streets. They end up doing alcohol. They're doing drugs. That's a cost. The lost production, that the money could be used for other things. As you mentioned earlier, if we had $3 trillion, you wouldn't have to worry about a health care program. You wouldn't have to worry about how big the national debt is. You wouldn't have to worry about the national deficit. But we have chosen to take a different path. Now, everyone in this room, as I gave a lecture this morning in a class in economics, everyone in this room is responsible. Every one of you. Because you tacitly went along, maybe some of you protested, but basically the bulk of the country got led along like sheep to the slaughter. And nobody said anything. I have written many times and been stepped on many times about why we are getting ourselves into a mess. The Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan wars. This is not what we should be putting our efforts into. It's not where we should be putting our money. I've argued for health care. I've argued very strenuously for health care because I am a recovering cancer patient. I have not been able to buy health insurance for 8 years. On April 1st, I have health care, thanks to Medicare. If the Republicans have their way, and that's why I'll be working for Rick very hard, if the Republicans have their way, they would kill Medicare. They would kill Social Security. You may or may not remember that President Reagan, for whom seems to be an idol for the Republican Party, and if any of you Republicans, you can shoot me later. If you don't know what my political stand is by now, you don't read my column at all. I sort of snuck that in there a few times. President Reagan ran what they call tea parties, but not the kind of tea parties that we're talking about with the current party. What he did was, he had the AMA have the doctors' wives have tea circles or tea parties, at which time they would convince people to vote against Medicare. He didn't want the program. He said it would ruin the United States. Therefore, we managed to get that program through. Maybe we'll get health care through. If we would stop funding the wars, which I do not believe will happen, for the record. It will not happen for a number of reasons. First of all, we are in so deep that I cannot see an exit strategy. There is some points made of which are legitimate. Now, I have not worked for the military complex for some time. I used to carry a top secret clearance. I've done a lot of work with what we call the spook agencies. And if you've been in the intelligence world, you know what I'm talking about. But we have a country called Iran, who's becoming an increasingly pain in the rear end. The ladies' presence, I'll be very careful. They have certain designs on that part of the world. They are a potential security problem. Why are they a potential security problem? Because they are, and I don't care what they say, are strenuously trying to obtain an atomic weapon. This weapon, they hope, could be aimed in two directions. One towards Israel and one towards the United States. They are a ways from having an intercontinental ballistic missile at this time, but they are working in that direction. They are too ignorant to realize that atomic weapons do not know boundaries. You explode an atomic weapon, those of you who have done any research on atomic warfare know there are no winners. They're all losers. No one wins. You all die. Radioactivity with a 1,000-year half-life does not show any favorites. They take out Israel, they destroyed their own country. I don't think they care. Their view on life is not our view on life. Therefore, we have to maintain some kind of a security force in the Middle East, in the Pakistan area, in the Afghanistan area. However, every country, it's like Vietnam, every country that's tried to take on Afghanistan has failed. Many people have gone in there, the Russians are the best example, they have all failed. What amazes me, absolutely amazes me, is why we don't learn. Starting back with the Revolutionary War, the British came at the United States with armored columns, or columns of soldiers marching in exact lines, going forward. And what do? We had people behind trees who just picked them off. You cannot fight guerrilla warfare with a standard army. This is basic army intelligence. We are going after the Taliban. These people absorb themselves into neighborhoods. They use IEDs. They don't care about human life. But you don't, I mean, what are you going to do? You can blanket bomb the entire area, and then that wipes out everybody. But then we have a little problem with civilians. So the cost of the war continues to rise. The only way it will stop is if the public opinion gets large enough to say to Congress, we cannot afford this war. Forget the morality for a minute. If you are wanting to buy a property, a home, or a car, and you go to the bank and you want to borrow the money and you don't have an income, or you do not have sufficient income, you cannot borrow it. You cannot borrow, you just can't do it. As a country, we cannot afford to continue fighting this war. We do not have enough money, in my opinion. Now, I can make a case on the other side, and there are people who will make this case, so let me make you aware of it. You can continue to run a deficit. You will hear people tell you that national debt and the deficit will kill us. No, not true. The national debt, as I told my students this morning, will be here long after everyone in this room is gone. Okay? It's not going to get paid off. It won't be paid off by our children or our grandchildren. It will be there. We have had a national debt for virtually the entire history of the United States. The question is, the key question is, can you carry the debt? Think of yourself with your mortgage, if you have a mortgage, or have had a mortgage in your life. When you went to the bank to borrow for the mortgage, they said, can you carry this mortgage? Can you make a payment that's not going to exceed 20% of your take-home pay, or whatever guidelines they used? As long as the answer was yes, you can have the mortgage. I could go out right now, get a mortgage, 30-year mortgage, I'm 65, that makes me 95 years old when the thing is finally paid off. Assume I say I die at 85. What do I care? I've had the house for 30 years. As long as I can make the payments. It is my estimation, and I'm using some numbers from Mr. Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize winner in economics 2008. And the calculations are, if the economy continues to grow in accordance with a